you know, the place just filled me with such peace and tranquility. But I noticed, and that's how I started doing the reading about Paul and got into your books, was because they were displayed on the coffee table in the living room. And then there was just a whole section of the living room devoted to Paul, with the beautiful rendition of his architectural drawings for the house, and also just a great picture of him. And so that's what really triggered my passion about this.
Are there any pictures of my grandfather with Mr. Holmes?
There aren't. I'm going to show you. I'm out in the garden right now, but I have the photos of the original house with the baby John Holmes, who's Harry's little son, who then went on to build the. I mean, he really grew the company. So Merle is joining this, and I want to introduce Dana Crawford, who is our lead architect for the addition and the remodel. So I think Dana knows George well, but this is Karen Hudson and Mary Ann Gum.
Excellent.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning. It's such a delight to meet you both and to see you, George and Susan, again.
And Merle is joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Merle.
Good morning.
I can't see you, Merle. Where are you?
Okay, let's see. I see you. Let's see, I'm joining.
There you are. There you are.
Hi, sweetie.
Hi, Mary Ann.
There you are, beautiful. Look at that garden.
Look at the garden.
How marvelous. Is that in your conservatory? Or
No,
is that the door?
No, this is in the kitchen. This
Oh.
is and that's the garden. Here's the garden.
Wow. Beautiful.
Wow.
Wonderful.
No, it's not
Karen,
just beautiful,
you haven't been in a
spectacular
while.
garden of all.
Karen hasn't been here in a while, but you'll have to come back, Karen.
I will,
Anyways.
but you know, it's still always spectacular.
Thank you. Well, we've done a really beautiful job on painting, and you're going to approve.
Okay.
Okay. So, and Marilis, could you bring the papers down from my desk? There's on my dressing table. There's a bunch of papers. I'm going to get the brochure that we printed out for the about the house in the beautiful Paul Williams Harry and David house.
Yes.
Thank you.
So before I forget, I know that it was mentioned, but there were no pictures of things in either of my other books about the house. And I'm working on a book now on my two grandfathers, Paul Williams and Dr. H. Clyde Hudson, who was a dentist, lawyer, banker, civil rights leader here in Los Angeles, and their friendship. And it's in this book. So I will be talking about Mr. Holmes and my grandfather and the Medford house.
All right.
Exciting.
Have you seen Karen's book on two books on Paul Williams? They're really beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, I
yeah.
have both of them, and I was going to show them to you because they came from Dana Crawford, our architect here on the left, who helped us with all the wonderful addition, and then just modifying slightly so we complied with all of the rules for having a hospice house. But I have both of the books, and I have the pictures of your beautiful home, Merle, in that. It's in the beginning of the book on the classic Hollywood.
Right.
Marvelous.
Right.
And
beautiful enduring house. When you think it was built in 1925, and the lines of it and the classic proportions are so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know the story, Karen, how Mary Ann first encountered the house in on my dressing table, not the desk, on the dressing table. You can leave that back on the desk. How Marianne encountered the house. Does Karen know that story?
I was giving her a little bit of that backstory. Yes. Thanks, Merle.
It would make my grandfather so happy, and he'd be so proud of you, Dana, as a woman, to have made this conversion into this hospice house.
Oh my
That would
goodness.
make him, he would be overjoyed that the home was being that way.
I love the story where Marianne walked into the house and she said, "This feels so familiar. It feels so resonating something, you know." And pictures, it definitely does.
Yeah, it was deja vu all over again.
Well, he always said he built homes, not houses.
Oh,
That's right.
Isn't that the truth? How you can really feel something kind of ancient and human in his spaces. They're just so full of grace and uplift that it really is transforms all of the materials into something that is like nutritional to your soul. It's just amazing.
Dana, where are you located?
I am in Ashland, so
Okay.
it's very, very close by to Celia's house.
Mhm.
And Karen, thank you so much for that statement. That really is so meaningful. And your books helped us kind of pull the threads of who Paul was. And that really helped us to understand what a trailblazer he was, and what a trailblazer Harry Holmes was. And
Right.
then Southern Oregon Friends of Hospice, it's kind of that kind of spirit is aligned. And it seems like his home was absolutely the perfect alignment for Celia's house.
Excuse me for interrupting. Do you guys remember Mission Pack? Those fruit packages, I think, pre Harry and David. I was looking
right.
at some, and he did a home for the Mission Pack people too.
Oh,
And then I realized, when I was a kid, my grandmother sent baskets to everybody from everywhere. It was like, Harry and David gets my money regularly. It makes me so happy because I feel like the connection to my grandparents, and it's such a quality product. And it always makes our recipients happy. So,
Karen, where is the Mission House, the Mission Pack House?
right behind the Beverly Hills Hotel. The block right behind it, going up the hill, right behind the Beverly Hills Hotel.
Wonderful. Well, would you like to hear the story of how this all came about?
Yes.
Of course we would.
Okay. So Southern Oregon Friends of Hospice started in 2009, and with the dream of creating a hospice house someday in Southern Oregon, because so many people aren't able to care for themselves or their loved ones are not able to care for them. They might be elderly, or they don't have a safe home, or their children all live too far away. And so we had a dream of creating a residential hospice. And we started with a little resale shop, which is a boutique. It's very high-end resale in Ashland, called The Hub, or the Hospice Unique Boutique. And that started in 2009. Almost all doctors and nurses that had worked in hospice that really knew we needed this service in Southern Oregon. The closest one to us was in Bend. And as time went along, we raised about $130,000. We'd given about $90,000 in grants to hospice programs in our area, but we also raised about $130,000 to buy some land. And we went to Dana and her ORW architecture firm and had a design of a hospice house from the ground up, looking for bare land. And we used an architectural book that was written by some British architects about hospice architecture, and things like windows being low enough so that you can see out of the bed, and seeing outside and bringing the outdoors in, and having beautiful ceilings, because residents would be looking at the ceilings, and places for families to gather. Well, as it turned out, we looked and looked. We looked for 2.5 years and could not find a piece of land that we were looking for, a park-like setting. We wanted 2 acres of land. And it turned out that over time, we realized we really needed to be in Medford, and we needed to be in between the 2 competitive hospitals. And so I started to drive around this old Medford neighborhood where there's large pieces of, parcels. And I saw this huge grassy field with oak trees on it, but I thought, how strange that open area is right there in the middle of the city. But because this house is so protected, I didn't even notice it. But I had my Zoom filter, not my Zoom filter, my Zillow filter, another Z, on 1 acre parcels in the middle of Medford. And this house came up, and it was $1.3 million, so 10 times the amount of money we had. And it took me about 2 weeks to have enough nerve to call the realtor and say, we have no business looking at this house, but we are looking for a place to create a hospice home, and would you let us come see it? And they did, and 20 of us on the board and people who are on the land search came to this house. And the lovely prior owners, Paula and Jay Beckstead, they lived here for 20 years. We're both doctors, pathologists and biochemists, marvelous gardeners, love the idea of it being a hospice house. And they had the house on the market for 4 years. And we gave an offer of requesting a 6-month escrow, and could we bring donors through the house? And would you finance half of it for us? And they agreed to that. And we'll name the beautiful walking path around the whole property. We always wanted a contemplative walk for people who were grieving, families who were struggling. And we'd like to name that after you. And so they accepted our offer, and I brought donors through, and we only raised $500,000. And so they said, you know what, we want to stay in the house another 6 months. Could you, if you let us stay in, we won't let you, because you don't have to pay your mortgage, and we won't pay any rent, you won't pay any mortgage, and you can have 6 more months to raise the money. And so we did. So we raised the 1.3, we were able to buy it. And on June 1st of 2017, we had our groundbreaking. And on May of 2018, we finished and we opened up for serving patients. And we have taken care of 250 people since we opened 2 years ago. The marvelous thing about the story, it has had magic associated with it all the way through. We were looking for a park-like setting, approximately 2 acres. This is a 2-acre parcel in the middle of a 20-acre park. And so it's really, really remarkable. So, and it's always, we have a wonderful story about the house that was written in 1984, where the Medford Parks and Recreation said, you know, we'd love to be able to buy this house, but to use as some sort of community facility. So that was 25 years ago that they were thinking in those terms, and we were able to do that. So as time went on,
It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Absolutely meant to be. So I'm going to walk us around. Starting, this is the. You got to see the garden video that we sent, so you kind of had the aerial perspective of the house. This is the addition back here, and it's really quite, you know, inspired by Paul Williams' design, and it's really hidden, really, from the front of the original house. And this is the wing off the back. as we walk through.
Susan, your thumb, I think, is
Oh.
blocking that a little bit. Thank you.
Sorry. This is just marvelous ancient oaks and archways. How's that looking? Can you see
that
it?
looks
The house is coming into view.
Coming into view. So
What a day
here's-
for a tour.
So this,
It's
oh, it's
beautiful.
a beautiful day. So here's the front of the house. This is the only blank canvas we have left. That parking in the front and the gardens that surround it. Here's the house, all the original
Tilt
house.
your camera up a little, Susan. Tilt your camera up a little so we can see the whole house. There you go.
Is that
That's
good?
better. Yeah.
There we go.
oh.
So one of the things I'm doing right now for the Friends, and Dana did a great job about hiding the addition. When I talked to the state about putting it on the National Register, which is the project I'm working on, the state's comment was, well, didn't you guys just build this huge addition that's almost as big as the house? And I said, yes, we did, but of course it was compatibly designed, and the way it's sited, you can't really see it. And in that picture that Susan's walking up, you really don't know that the addition is there, which is exactly what we tried to do. And it worked out really well. And so I'm quite confident that we're going to be able to get it on the National Register.
May I ask a question? How did you fund the addition?
Well, we continue to name things throughout the house, and everything in the house is named except for the dining room and the garden, the circle garden in the front. And we broke grants in the beginning, and over time we received a $250,000 gift, and then a $500,000 gift, and then ultimately $1 million gift to name it Celia's house. So the Holmes family, we initially called it the Holmes Park house because it was in the Holmes Park, but the Holmes family has not yet decided to get involved. They've named a bench in honor of John Holmes, but they haven't yet named anything significant in the house. But at the it was October of 2018 that Jed Meese decided to name it Celia's house in honor of his wife, Celia. And it was so beautiful because I'd been talking to him for 2 or 3, 4 years. I've known him a long time on the Ashland Family YMCA board, but a lovely local philanthropist. And I had thought, what might we name the house other than Holmes Park House? And I looked up the name Celia, and in Latin it means heavenly beauty. Celia means heavenly beauty. And I thought, oh, Celia's house, that's the perfect name. And so I suggested that to Jed, and he said right there on the spot, okay, let's do it. And so it's honoring his wife Celia. But the official name is Celia's house in Holmes Park, because Holmes Park was given by John Holmes, who inherited the home from his father, Harry. Harry lived to be 1958. He died, I think, or 1959. 1959. So John was still very young. He was in his teens. But when he became of age, he donated the park, because this was originally 20 acres, and he donated 18 acres of the park to the city of Medford, and he named it Holmes Park in honor of Eleanor and Harry, his parents. And it's all developed and beautiful right on that side of the property. There, you can't really see anything, but there's a playground and walking paths and a pickleball tennis court. And then I'll show you the other side when we get when we get on the other side. But I think you'll see like some of his lovely characteristic touches, like these octagon windows. They're everywhere, and then you can see the beautiful treatment on the door. Can you see that? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then this I wanted to show you. This is the plaque that honors Paul Revere Williams there. And also the ORW architecture, which Dana is part of. And the Oslin Group was our builder. So we tried really hard to mimic what was originally here. You can see this is the original brick, and then there was a circular shape. This shape of the brick was what was here, but we needed to make it ADA friendly. So we extended the brickwork. All the stone wall is original still. And then there was a double door here, and we needed to have a handicap accessible door. So we made it one door, but we kept all the hardware and things. So this is how you're greeted. I hope you can see that.
So
Yep.
pretty.
And you're welcomed right outside to this. This used to be outside the terrazzo, and then it was enclosed. And then this is the marvelous
Nice.
view.
Wow. Beautiful.
That's Mount Ashland in the distance. Can you see it?
Hardly. Not so. Oh, I see now. Yeah.
There's smoke from the fires, unfortunately.
Third tallest mountain in Oregon.
It's actually quite clear, but I'm gonna. So
That's
here's
beautiful. Oh yes, there.
these
That's so
lovely oak trees.
Susan, how did the Holmes family know about Paul Williams in 1939?
So I'm going to share my story, and then I'll let George correct me. So my story is that they went to the home of the Carrell residents of Amos and Andy and visited them at a party. And they were inspired by the architecture, and they wanted a replica of the same home. And apparently Paul Williams said, no, I only design custom homes, and but I'll design you a home. And he partnered with the local Frank Clark and Robert Clark Keeney, and mostly designed it via correspondence, and sent designs back and forth. So, and I have the original designs. I mean, I don't have the original, but I have a copy of the original. And after we're done, I was going to send a PowerPoint with kind of all the documents and all the historic photos and things I have. I can forward them to Marianne, and she can share them with you. I wanted to show you, this is the original house.
It looks just like our house.
I know.
Right? Don't you think, Karen?
Yes. Yes.
We have a covered front porch. That's the difference but the symmetry
Feeling. Same
portion
feeling.
and the height and the columns, so are so similar.
And the little, do you see the little baby right there? That's John Holmes, Harry and Eleanor's little baby boy. And then this, so I don't think Dana got to see these. I got these from a family that lived here in the 60s, the 50s, the 60s. And this is the backyard. So there wasn't that patio back there. It was just a lovely grass lawn. The terrazzo was there and the columns.
These are such great photos.
I know. I was so excited when they showed up.
So Susan, I don't know if all of you are aware, USC and the Getty Research Institute recently acquired his archive.
Yes.
And I have no pictures of the Medford project to go with the archive. So if you guys would like to be included in what goes to the Getty, send me something.
I will.
May I ask your question, Karen? Were you aware of this house until before Marianne brought it to our attention?
Only that it was listed. I mean, you know, and I sort of knew the Harry and David part of it. And it is the Carrell house, not Carrell.
Oh,
Charles
sorry.
Carrell. Charles Carrell, who was Amos and Andy on radio.
Yeah.
Don't want anybody to think Black folks lived on Sunset Boulevard in the 30s, because they did that. But, it was, and Mr. Carrell was, you know, one of my grandfather's favorite, lovely man.
Where is that Carrell house?
I'll send you the address. I want to say it's 10521 Sunset.
I have it in this book.
Oh.
Here's your, I think Dana may be the only one that doesn't know. This is Merle's house.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that
Wow.
something?
And Peter
Beautiful.
and Merle, when you were talking about the area that was open and then it was eventually covered, that's what that area was. When it was originally designed, it was open.
Right.
And how long ago, Merle, did Peter say he came to me, like 30 years ago, and asked me about covering it?
I knew Peter, and he was so respectful of, in fact, someone told me a story just yesterday that she had been looking up something about Paul Williams, and that they had written about Peter wanting this house, wanting to buy this house because it was Paul Williams. And so Peter was very attached to the fact, to Paul's work, and he wanted to be respectful. So he, and I wasn't there, so Karen can corroborate this, but he consulted with Karen when he wanted to enclose what was an outdoor, the outside, because the house was kind of a U. It has a very large garden, but it was kind of had a U. It was built around a brick patio, and an outdoor patio. And the bricks are still there. The original bricks are there, and they're still stamped 1925. And Peter wanted to enclose it. So he did the big archway. At first, he left the clapboard siding of the house and the windows that were there at the time. Ultimately, we clad it with trellis, very, very beautiful hand wrought trellis in a very lovely pattern, so that we covered, and the clapboard remained, but we covered it with this trellis, so that, and in a very quiet color. So it looks very, very nice. And my daughter-in-law told me that on Pinterest, it is the most viewed conservatory on Pinterest. If you look about conservatories, the number of views it has, it's the most popular conservatory. I don't know
That's
how
my
it gets Pinterest. Maybe do you think Art Luna put it on Pinterest?
Maybe. You and I didn't.
No.
But when Peter came to me, it had to be 30 years ago. And he asked me, like, what do you think? And I wanted to say, you know, I'm not my grandfather. I really don't, I have no architectural background. What can I tell you? But it was great to talk to him because it was my first time to really understand the depth of what people's emotions were about the work. And the only thing I could add was that the design that he showed me felt so much like my grandfather, with the curves and that understated elegance that comes through no matter what year something's built, that I just said, it's a great idea. And Peter was so happy. And I was thinking, I hope I didn't make a mistake, but it turns out to be perfect.
Yeah.
This is the Carrell house right here. So it's not exactly the same. I wonder how it looks nowadays. Do you know?
It just sold for $1 bajillion, some ridiculous amount of money.
Uh-huh.
I need to think about it. Sheldon Leonard lived there for a while, but it was just on the market. Maybe I can look it up while we're talking.
If you look up the address, you'll probably see. But you know, just the background of the living room where you are right now is so resonates our library, which is we call the library now, but it just so resonates, Susan, our library, the bay window, and it just, I understand how Marianne like connected to the familiarity of it.
Yeah, that picture of your library is also in this book. Well, and the dining room has a beautiful.
Yeah, the window behind, the bow window behind you is very much like the bow window in our dining room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wanted to show you, and I'll send a copy of this to you.
Oh,
when we first opened the house, well, we did a couple things. In the addition, we wrote little notes to the people that would be living and dying in those rooms underneath the floorboards. And then our volunteers, we have 200 volunteers. We came when we had the grand opening, we blessed each room. We walked from room to room and we blessed each room. And we're not a religious organization, so it's very, very multicultural, very ecumenical in the poems, but and the prayers. But we put all those blessings in this book, and we gave this as a gift to our donors and to our volunteers. Yeah,
that's so lovely.
Yeah. So
I'd
that's
like to go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, Susan. I just wanted to interject something that made such an impression on me, and that is that every patient family is presented with a quilt of their choice that's been made by a number of groups, as I understand it, of quilters in the city, including our church. And so I was able to pick out a beautiful quilt in honor of Ron. And as a matter of fact, at his memorial services, that quilt covered a large table with memorabilia that reflected his life, and a sweet little note attached to the end of the corner of the quilt, given with love from these groups that made this happen. And I can't tell you the selection. I mean, I had to go back 2 or 3 times to make a decision, but it was so meaningful to me.
You guys are going to make me cry.
Me too.
So I think that Marianne mentioned that everything in the house has been donated, and there's a lovely little baby grand piano here, and a wonderful grandfather clock. This is the well, here, I'll show you this. This right here, I was sitting on. Can you see it?
Yes.
That was donated by the Holmes family, and it was in Harry and Eleanor's house back when they lived here. And the all the embroidery was done by Susan Holmes, who was Harry and David's wife, did that. And then here, so I've just given so many tours, and we eventually when it became public with our fundraising, we would invite people through the newspapers. So I had so many people that worked at Harry and David that came to the house and told me the stories of Harry. I mean, the 90-year-old ladies, you know, that worked for him. And we've cared for maybe 5 or 6 people that have worked for Harry and David at the end of their life here. So how, you know, what an honor to be able to be cared for in the home of the founder of the company they worked for. But this is the history board that I made long ago, probably now 3-4 years ago. But I would talk about the Harry and David story here, and then Paul Williams, and I had his photo with the iconic building at the airport, and then this is a story that includes a lot about Paul Williams as the designer to the stars and the golden age, and it talks about the park. And director Greg Jones said, we thought, boy, it sits right in the middle of the park, and wouldn't it be nice to have it as a community facility? So that's what it looked like in 1984, or 1994, excuse me.
Did the Holmes originally live in Los Angeles?
No.
Well, Eleanor no, the story is Sam Rosenberg was the owner of the Sorrento Hotel in Seattle, and he made his fortune with selling supplies, and he was a clothier for the gold rushers that went to Alaska. And he built the Sorrento Hotel that still stands, and it's been renovated recently in downtown Seattle. And then he went to an exposition where they featured the pears, and he said that he sold a lemon for a pear. And he bought 240 acres of pear orchard here in Southern Oregon. And then the boys went to Cornell University. They were Rosenbergs at the time. And so there's sort of an anti-Semitism theme, along with, you know, having an African-American architect in 1939 in Southern Oregon is pretty unique. They changed their name from Rosenberg to Holmes in 1938 because of the anti-Semitism of that time period. And the Rosenberg boys went to Cornell University because that was the only Ivy League that allowed Jews at the time. And they both studied agriculture and primarily animal husbandry, but they ended up coming back and obviously becoming pear farmers. And then the whole story with they had made friends on the East Coast, and they went to the Waldorf Astoria. And the story is that they went to a advertising agency, and they suggested they had these boxes of properly packed pears, and they were ripening in the Waldorf Astoria, and they wrote handwritten notes on their stationery to people like Alfred Sloan and Walter Chrysler and several other famous businessmen at the time, suggesting that they might give it as a client gift at the holidays. And Walter Chrysler called Harry over, and he ordered 467 boxes of pears. And that was in like 1935. That was like the end of the, during the middle of the Depression. And then they were list managers, and they sent, you enjoyed those pears last year, maybe you'd like to send it to your clients. And that's how they built their business. So, wow. So Eleanor was from Chicago, and she was in fashion. And so I think it was her elegant taste that probably influenced Harry to pick such a beautiful home. But George, you have more to say on that?
Sure. Sam died when they had just graduated from college, Sam Rosenberg, and that's how they ended up, against their own wishes and judgment, they wanted to raise sheep, and they ended up getting thrust into the pear business. The rest of what Susan told is exactly right. They went to New York in the Depression, Harry did, and the pears were ripening and rotting, and he panicked, and they basically sent pears to business leaders with a note that says, aren't these great pears? You should send them out. And that's how they built the business. Eleanor worked for an advertising agency, and Harry met her late in life. He was in his 40s when he married her. She was younger, and her father was a judge. And they had a fairly whirlwind romance, I think, and got married right at the end of 1937. Lived in a rental house. Harry had always lived in an apartment building before as a single man. And they rented a house. And I think that we don't know that exactly how they found Paul Williams. I think Susan's story is one of many, that they were at a party at a house and enjoyed it. They could have also, Eleanor could have seen an article in a magazine. What we do know is that Harry did contact Paul Williams and say, I really like the Carrell house and I'd like to buy the plans for it and build it on this site I own in Medford. And Paul Williams said, I don't sell plans, but I'm happy to design a house for you. And then Robert Keeney, the younger partner of Clark and Keeney, which are a fairly prominent Medford firm, Keeney had designed a packing warehouse that's beautiful. It's an Art Deco building in Medford for Harry and David. And Bob Keeney did a oral history in the 80s, and really all we know, the only facts we have about that connection come from Keeney's oral history. There was nothing in the newspaper when this house was built. There was really very little information. Keeney reports that Harry Holmes called Paul Williams. Paul Williams told him he wouldn't sell him the plans, but he'd happily design a house for him, but that he wasn't licensed in Oregon. So he'd have to have an associate architect in Oregon that could sort of, supervise the construction. And Harry said, well, there's this young architect that designed this building for me, and Robert Keeney, he could do it. And Robert Keeney, in later life, says that's what they agreed to do. The way that Bob Keeney reported the design process was that Paul Williams would send up plans, and Harry and Robert Keeney would get together and comment on them, and they'd send them back to Paul Williams, and he would modify them, and it was this iterative process. You would ask Karen if there were any photos of Harry Holmes with Paul Williams. I don't have any documentation that Paul Williams ever came to Medford. He might have, but we don't.
What about the other homes that he did later in Medford?
Well, those are really interesting stories too. I'm glad you brought that up. The second house he did was for a gentleman named Glenn Jackson, who is a legendary Oregonian. He was the president of one of the largest utilities in the state, the chair of the state Oregon Department of Transportation Board. There is a major bridge across the Columbia River called the Glenn Jackson Bridge in his honor. Very, very influential man. And the story that Robert Keeney reports as to how the Glenn Jackson house was built by Paul Williams is just strange. Jackson was the aide to an Air Force general during World War II, General Eaker, who was ends up as a 4-star general. And according to Robert Keeney, Eaker had hired Williams to design a house in Southern California, probably in Palm Springs. Your records might actually document that.
Is Ira Eaker?
Ira Eaker. Yes, Eaker.
And it's right there with his Glenn Jackson.
And so Eaker, for whatever reason, decided he didn't want to build the house. He, changed his mind or something. And he said to Glenn Jackson, well, I have these plans, I'll just give them to you. And that's how the Jackson house was designed by Williams. And the third house is a much more modest home. It's been expanded considerably since, and was owned by a local businessman who had just recently divorced his wife, and he built this house for himself and his new wife. And I have repeatedly tried to contact the family just to kind of find out if they know anything about it, and they don't want to talk about it.
Is that the Luttrell family?
Correct. Luttrell owned an auto parts store and was also a state senator, and built the house in, I want to say 54 or 5. And only
Plans
lived
show
in,
1948.
I don't know that he might
Doesn't
have.
mean it was built then.
Yeah, it
The
could have been
plans
one
were
of those.
done in 1948. They were
Yeah,
done before the
Yeah.
Eaker Jackson ones.
Well, I'm sure that Littrell ended up with Paul Williams somehow through Holmes. Eleanor died early. Before her death, the house was sort of a culture, a center, a community center. She had book groups and garden clubs, and it was such a large, elegant house. And she was such the person she was that she would invite everybody over, and the Holmes house sort of became a central location. And I'm sure that Littrell, being who he was, would have known Harry Holmes, and they must have gone to a party and said, "This is a great house. We want one too." But I don't have any information about that I can document.
Well, that happened often. Let me tell you guys a couple things. The Charles Carrell house, if you want to look it up, is 10250 Sunset Boulevard. It is not on the market right now, but the Redfin estimate is 57 million.
Wow.
Wow.
At 10250 Sunset Boulevard, LA 90077. And it shows 20 photos that were from when it was last sold in 2005, I believe. And then also, I had no thought of this before, but listening to Susan talk about the anti-Semitism and my perception of what Oregon is, and you're saying, George, that there are no articles and things. 2 things come to mind. Number one, even when he did things in states where he was not licensed, he often traveled there as well, and there were stories about it. He would not have traveled if they did not want them to know he had a Black architect. That did happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened as, even as late as like 1962 with St. Jude Hospital. They could not say he was a Black architect. They called him an architect from the coast. And it was not till 10 years later when Mr. Thomas had a dinner for him that they kind of revealed a Black person had designed this.
Wow.
So that, if there were those kind of feelings going on in Oregon, that may have been part of the no articles and his not visiting.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, Karen. In 1942, there was a U.S. military base built in White City, which is sort of near Camp White, and Medford, especially at that time period, was not particularly welcoming to people of color. And I wrote a book on Camp White 20 years ago, and there was a huge contingent of African-American troops, mostly from the South, that came into Medford. And the general in charge, so this is 2 years after the Holmes house was completed, they could not be certain, the restaurants and whatever in Medford wouldn't serve them. And it became severe enough that the general, Major General Charles Gerhardt, basically issued an edict. He told the Chamber of Commerce, which was headed by Glenn Jackson, who ends up, so everybody's connected. But basically, he told the Chamber of Commerce that if you will not serve all my troops, I will put your entire city off limits to my troops. So figure it out. And that's how they started serving the Black soldiers at Camp White for the first time. So there was definitely that sentiment.
So that may have been part of it, because even if he was really busy at the time, which he was in the late 30s, and couldn't travel, or, many of the places like Pennsylvania or Oklahoma are places where he didn't have license, he still traveled those places, particularly during construction, maybe not at the beginning when they were seeing things back, because it was fun for him to see the completed building or see things as they're going. And he was very opinionated during construction when he went to see sites and said, "You're not doing this correctly." So I think that you added another little piece to what probably happened during the time.
Yeah.
I'm showing you this because I don't know if you can see it, but it says Rosenberg Brothers on this safe, and the safe was part of the foundation of the house.
Wow.
See that?
Yep.
Which is kind of fun. And the other thing is, it was very modern, I think, for the time. And this is now our storage area for the hospice, but it had a coal chute right there, which is now where the addition is, and it had a coal burning fire, heating system, and it actually had, central heat. So that was actually still here when we first were here. Now it's been modernized, obviously, a little bit, but I don't know if you can see the Rosenberg Brothers up there or not.
Can you point to it where the actual letters are? Because I know that they're very faint.
Yeah, it's Rosenberg Brothers. It's hard to see because it's been painted over, but that will always be here.
You're going to show us the stairwell, right, Susan?
What's that?
You're going to show us the stairwell?
Well, of course I am, but
Okay.
you were telling me stories in there.
You walk through the entrance foyer down to the basement, and there you go.
There it is. He had a wonderful, I call it like a modern or old-fashioned solar tube. Can you see?
The skylight up at the top.
Skylight.
And the really elegant chandelier that comes down through the second floor to the first floor it's just spectacular.
When I was little, I used to think that, and if you've ever read my children's book, you've heard this, that my grandfather, when I was old enough, could just, if I was getting married or something, give me a set of plans and I could just build a house. And I was so disappointed when he told me, no, I need to see the land. I need to know, what the topography is, where the sun is coming from. And so this is the first project I've heard of where they said, he was just never there and he designed it because all that was so important to him. And the landscaping, it would have already been there, trees or something like that. So he must have had somebody there with the architects that he worked with, giving him very detailed,
Well, and he could have been here, Karen, don't get me wrong.
No, I mean, I'm saying he could have been,
record.
but I don't think he was there regularly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there were some things he was a stickler about, and one of them was, it's the same as like not selling plans. You just don't say, if it works at this house, it's going to work at this house. Like the Eager house in Palm Springs, wherever it was, I'm sure was modified before it got to the Medford house. But maybe some of the more grand things or the details were part of it. Very interesting.
Well, in the Eager house, now the Jackson house, is kind of like the Holmes house located in the center of a road system. So there's houses all around it, not park, but it sits on an island essentially. It's a round plot surrounded by public road, and the house is in the middle. And there is in the plans that, I don't know whether you found them, Dana, or Susan did, but in the original Williams plans that we have, there is a topographic plan.
Right.
So somebody sent him, or he came up and did a site plan before he located the house.
Yeah, because that would have been paramount to the way he designed.
Yep. And it's kind of, there's some kind of rolling hills around, on the site, and the house itself is kind of right on the little plateau. I mean, it's on the top of that. And of course there are these, really beautiful trees surrounding it. So I think that, even if he may not have visited, you know, he made fabulous choices.
Right. Someone laid it out for him. And I'm sure he could have envisioned it if someone gave him that, but he was very.
So we have 9 people in the house right now. It's a 12-bed facility. This is Harry's room here, and the one I was showing before was Eleanor's room. So this is kind of the view out Harry's room. They didn't share a bedroom, but they shared a kind of an outdoor. I mean the wing. They shared the wing, and then I really wanted to save some of the beautiful closets and cabinetry, and everything fits really beautifully after 80 years, you know?
Those exact same drawers and closet were in his own home.
Oh, really? Yeah. Everything functions beautifully, you know?
Every woman in captivity who's ever lived in a Paul Williams house can thank my grandmother for their closets.
Uh-huh.
It was very clear to him on closet. Oh, I love it.
Marvelous.
On average, what's the length of the stay at the hospice of patients?
Yeah, the average is about 25 days. The median is about 12 days. So we have some people that are here for 6 months, some people who are here for 2 or 3 days. So, but the average is about 25 days. What's fun about this is it's was a linen closet and a cedar closet. And we turned it into a nursing station and a nurse's office. And Dana designed it. They used to have pass-through bathrooms. Hello. You have a question?
Well, I was just wondering if she got that pain relief cream.
Go ahead and ask him. And then there's 2 more bedrooms here. So the 2 bedrooms, I used to like to say that if you were in a tricycle, you could go in a circle and you'd never run into a barrier. You know, you could go through the bathrooms from room to room. So all 4 rooms. There was a family that lived here that had 7 children, and they all lived in these rooms upstairs together, and it worked really beautifully for a big family. So this is the threshold of the addition on the inside, and that's the hallway, which turns a bit, just on a slight angle. Here's the elevator hall. Go ahead. And so we had to add the elevator with the addition. And then I love this. You know, these are the kinds of things, you don't have a ladder tall enough, so you don't know what the view is going to be like when you make an addition. But when you walk out the elevator, you see the cupola. You see that?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Of the original house.
On the wing, on the single story.
On the wing, yeah. You see here.
There we go. That's good.
Yeah. So this is the wing that has the curvature with the colonnade.
So from a National Register standpoint, when you have a house that has an addition that's basically as large as the main house, you have to be really careful about how you separate new and old. And it's when the knuckle between the two, you saw that there was a change in floor surfaces from wood to marble. And the addition is angled a little bit. So when you are in the entrance hall or the second floor hall of the Paul Williams design, it basically almost just appears as a door at the end of the hall. You don't realize that there's this whole other wing going on. So it's a really good case for, when you put a house on the register, it's called the man on the street test, that if the original owner or the designer came back, would they recognize that it was their house? And if you stand in most places of the original house, you're kind of not aware that there even is an addition, which is exactly the way it should be from a National Register standpoint. So even though the house has been doubled in size to accommodate this new use, Harry and Eleanor would still recognize it. which is great. And so would Mr. Williams.
So you're submitting that sometime soon?
Yeah, I'll submit it to the state before October of this year, and it'll get heard by the State Advisory Committee in February. And then assuming they recommend approval to the National Park Service, it'll get listed formally sometime around June of next year.
Keep me posted.
You bet. You bet. Kara or Susan can give me your contact information, and we'll make sure you get a copy. There's a person who has the greatest job title of anybody I can think of called the Keeper of the National Register. Their title is Keeper, and they literally write it in a book.
Wow.
So Dana, do you want to talk about your design of these bedrooms and how you were inspired by Paul Williams' design?
Sure. Wow. I mean, where to start in terms of being inspired? But I think the main thing is that it was really important to honor the main house and harmonize with Paul Williams' design, but not imitate it, right, too closely, and let the main house really shine with its special details and its large, kind of gracious rooms, and for the addition to take those cues, but again, not too exactly. So we took a similar approach to the form, and we sited the addition at that small angle, similar to the way that the one-story wing was kind of bent, so that it would harmonize, but it would also be oriented to the best views. And so, as Karen mentioned, it's really important to try to make the most out of the site and how you site it. And then we had the similar approach to the form and the massing of the addition and the roof and so forth. And then small special features that addressed this new use of the house, like the Juliet balconies that Susan has been kind of coming up to, and the small nook at the end of the hall. So when you get to the end of the original house and you sort of turn that angle, you see blue sky and treetops, and other kind of small special details like the tall window in the stair of the addition, and things like that. And I think the real trick was maintaining this feel, this residential feel and grace of the main house and the addition, while meeting the technical requirements of lots of kind of overlapping codes. So you have to have like a nursing touchdown station in each in the addition and the main house, and you need to have an elevator. How do you make an elevator and the overrun, which is really tall, kind of nest in and not be too obvious and feel warm? And we needed firewalls and lots of technical things with the Oregon Health Authority. And we kind of joked that we had the there we go.
That's Alicia, our administrator.
Yeah.
Hi there. Hi there.
Hi.
And we sort of joked that we treated every room, or really strives to treat every room with kind of special care. And even the laundry room, for example, has a beautiful view, and it had to have this very certain flow to meet hospice's requirements of soiled linen to clean linen. And so we kind of joked that it was like the best laundry room in the West. You'll probably see shortly.
It's called My Beautiful Laundrette.
Right. There you go.
My Beautiful Laundrette.
Oh my gosh.
And
Oh,
look at the view.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so we took many cues from Paul Williams's original design, and tried to sprinkle the detailing in ways that felt warm and harmonize with the main house, but not overshadow the main house.
Congratulations, you did a great job. I think he would be pleased. Also, as you well know, one of his hallmarks is bringing the outdoors in. So the fact that there were these views and the fact that there was, the organicness of the outdoors being so visible, even when someone's lying down, would have made him very happy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thank you, Karen.
Well, you did it. All I'm doing is viewing. You did it. So congratulations. There are so many people. Let me not talk about architects, but there are so many who have an opportunity to enhance or, in their mind, change an original something. And sometimes egos get in the way of what needs to really happen to preserve the integrity of the original building. And I'm sure you've experienced this, Dana, George. I'm sure you've seen this plenty of places. And so, it really makes a difference. I was wondering, Susan, how you guys are dealing with COVID. Do families still get to come in?
Yes. So we all wear masks. Technically, if we can't keep 6 feet distance, we have to wear the shield over the mask. We allow 2 visitors at a time, and they make a compassion exception for end of life, which is lovely. So the state law allows visitors for people at the end of life. But we screen everybody that comes to the house. We limit it, everybody gets a pass, with their family visitor or a loved one visiting. And we're so far able to still do that. We've kept COVID rates down pretty well in the state of Oregon. So yeah, that's our situation now.
Because it's just heartbreaking when you look at the news and you see these poor people are having to, look at an iPad to see their family member who's passing away. It's just awful.
It is heartbreaking. And human touch and connection and energy, the feeling of, our culture is of mindful caregiving and kindness, and we bring music in, we bring, reading aloud to people, but the things that are the most important to people outside of, for palliative care, for the most important things are to the relief of symptoms, but the second is to have loved ones nearby. Third is human touch. Fourth is a sense of control. Fourth is, fifth is some mental awareness, and sixth is not being a burden. And so, the house is able, and our care and our volunteer force are able to provide and help support all of those priorities of people at the end of life, what really matters most to them. But we are limited. We're not able to do the kind, we're doing as the best we can with the rules as they stand right now.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is,
I wanted to just, go ahead.
the care, I'm sorry, is the care for each person funded by insurance or Medicare, or for all?
Well, ultimately, that would be my goal, is for Medicare to have a residential hospice benefit. We just were honored with a specific needs contract for Medicaid patients, so Medicaid does pay. The folks, we have 2 large hospitals in our area, Asante Health System and Providence, and the 2 hospitals have grants with us. And so they pay for bed days, and people who receive that grant, so somebody might be appropriate for hospice in the hospital, they're not able to leave the hospital. The hospital gives us a grant to pay for their stay here. So both of our large hospitals here have supported us in that way.
That's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And that means, people that really have nowhere. We've cared for 3 or 4 homeless people, and we really do care for the broad spectrum. The very wealthiest gentleman in our town, married to his wife for 70 years, wonderful philanthropist locally who owned the grocery store. He was dying on hospice, and then she broke her femur. And the hospital was going to send her to the, I can tell this story because it's okay. They've shared it very openly. She was going to go to the nursing home, and the family was just so beside themselves that they couldn't be together. And so we were able to care for both of them, rehabilitate her with her broken leg and take care of her while she sat in her wheelchair and held her husband's hand for the last 8 days of their lives, of their life together. And they were in the master bedroom in Eleanor's original room in the house for those last days. So we were able to care for a couple together as well. And that's happened on 2 occasions. The other time they were both on hospice.
You sound like you have a team of angels there.
Yeah. So I wanted to just show you the exterior that Dana designed, and what a beautiful job they did in matching the house here.
That's lovely, lovely.
And then we're working toward, we have a grant right now. This obviously wasn't of the era, so we have 2 grants, one for the pergola and one for the gazebo, to make them more historically accurate or compatible. And George has given his thumbs up to those things. And then I just wanted to share, this was where the pool was. The county wouldn't let us use it as a public pool. And I had been thinking all along of using that circle in the front where we ended up putting more parking and still have a beautiful area we need to landscape. I needed a place for a memorial, and the pool already had all these bricks all around it. And I also needed a place to honor the donors. And there was already a stucco wall. So I can't go too far in there, but that's going to be the donor wall. That's going to be done, sandblasted, and ongoing volunteer recognition, donor recognition, and capital campaign recognition. And then we have this wonderful angel sculpture by the artist Kevin Chrisman, who did the big, beautiful painting that was in the sunroom and also the stained glass. That's called the Alchemy of Light. We use the octagon shape to kind of go along with all of Paul Williams' octagon windows. And then all these bricks over time will be memorial bricks to the residents we care for. So because we couldn't use the pool, we converted it to that. And now it has this handicap pathway down there so that anyone in a wheelchair can get down there and enjoy the garden and the fountain. Yeah, so I was kind of going around.
Really?
What?
It's beautiful.
Thank you. George, I want you to share just the one quick story about how we had the National Registry people here and how they loved this use of the historic house.
Sure. Yeah, in that interim process where they had had an offer in, but were still raising money, it wasn't the National Registry, it was the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and a group of folks were coming to Oregon and wanted to know what was going on. And I took them, I called Susan, and I took the Western Regional Director of the Trust out to, it was then a private house. The addition had not yet been built, but we were talking about the conversion, the hoped for conversion of it from private dwelling to hospice. And they had some really great comments about how all over the country there are these larger houses that sometimes it's hard to find a use for, depending on where they're located. And they were really quite excited about the idea of transforming this large, elegant home into the hospice use. It hadn't been done anywhere else in the country yet. And they thought, we had a great conversation about how it was a perfect adaptive reuse and could become a model for other houses all over the country. Obviously, there's a need for hospice care everywhere. Most communities have houses like this that sometimes, despite their loveliness, can become white elephants just because the local economy, people can't afford them or whatever. And this is a really great way to take a house that was on the market for 4 years locally and convert it into something that really is open to available to the public and continues to benefit. And so it's kind of nice to get that affirmation from the National Trust for Historic Preservation that we were doing the right thing.
Well, all of you, on behalf of my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, thank you for all you've done. I can honestly tell you this would make him so happy. It would really make him so happy. He lived the last 7 years of his life, 6.5 years of his life at home, not well, with full-time care. And for the most part, lost his eyesight as part of diabetes. And he didn't even always know he was an architect. But I think I've told Merle this story before. There are times we'd take him for a drive and he'd point out a building that was one of his, particularly the MCA building in Beverly Hills, and say, that's a fine piece of work. And we would just laugh because he didn't know it was his. He didn't know he was an architect, but he never lost the ability to know what was good and what wasn't good.
That's great. Wonderful.
Something really deeply felt by really good architecture. And it's so, it's like, it's spiritual. It's a deeper thing. It's something within that you can't really describe in words. But I feel that here.
Well, let me tell you what I feel like when I drive down the street and they've torn down one of his homes and built a house that looks like a supermarket. And it's just, heartbreaking is beyond, what it is. I had to learn to get over it and not come home crying all the time. Because it wasn't the fact that it was his, it was the same way I feel about architecture. And you talk about Octagon, there was this beautiful little home in Beverly Hills right off of the main street, Santa Monica Boulevard, where the parkways are, and it was built for a French couple. And you walk into an octagon hallway to a foyer, and it was just beautiful, lovely, like a jewel of a house. And one day it was there, 2 weeks later I drove by, it was gone. And it sat beautifully on this piece of land. It was a small piece of land. And they built a square box that went all the way to the end of every property line, all the way around. There was no greenery at all. It was just this monstrosity. And so it taught me to have a greater appreciation for things like what you guys have done. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Marianne, for putting this together.
You're so welcome. This is
one thing
joy.
Long before I knew who Paul Williams was, or that there was a Paul Williams, because I grew up in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills, I was so in love with that MCA building. It was built like a home. It's still there. It is so beautiful and graceful, and it was always my favorite building. And I
this home was done.
So later.
And people ask me what was my grandfather's favorite building. And I always say it was whatever he was working on at the time, because that's what he used to say. But when you are not well and don't know you're an architect and you pick out that building, I think MCA was his favorite. And it remains favorite of mine. And you talk about it looks like a home. Even if it was a professional building or a huge corporation, he always felt that you ought to live and work in the same kind of feeling you have when you were at home. So those places were always built like homes.
And another experience of mine that was meant so much to me, and I believe to Ron. He, of course, couldn't express that, and that was that music throughout the home. I think there's a lovely harp on. It seemed to me that as I would walk through the house, I would see these beautiful harps, And there was a gal that would give her time to this, to hospice. And she started playing at the memory care center where Ron was through hospice, once hospice took him over. And that was the segue into his admission to the hospice house. But the music continued, the Threshold Singers, and I mean, so many just wonderful performances of love and grace and hopefulness seemed to me to surround us. I could hear it in the hallways, and it was a wonderful touch.
That's wonderful.
Even the sounds of the music and the feeling of the breeze, coming through each of the residents' bedrooms, and the smell of baking cookies, it just creates a very special experience for people who are living there and their family members. It's just, the house continues to touch so many lives in such an important, special way.
Okay, given what we all see on the news every day, all the madness, music and warm baked cookies, I think would make all of us happy every single day. Every single day. Make my grandfather happy. He was diabetic, but when you got old enough to drive, he'd start paying you to go get him a piece of pie or something like that. And Merle, you're the only one from LA, so he loved Will Wright's ice cream. And yeah, who didn't, right? And he would just smile and say, sweetie, if you just happen to be in that neighborhood, you just happen to pick me up some ice cream. So I will be envisioning warm baked cookies, and I will have on some music today for all of you.
Can I ask one question, Karen? The Will Wright, speaking of Will Wright's, was in a building in Beverly Hills on the corner of Charlottesville and Beverly Drive. That was
Right.
Corinne Griffith's building. And it had aspects of Paul, but he didn't design that, did he? It had those beautiful columns. It was brick.
Okay. I never thought about the fact that's where it was, because, there were a number of locations of Will Wright's, but he did do work for Corinne Griffith.
Oh, I bet he did. There were two corners, the northeast and the southeast corners.
So he might have done the buildings, and then Will Wright's came in later.
Because the buildings, Will Wright's came in and changed the architecture, but they were very beautiful, and they had so many of the aspects of your grandfather.
But he did do work for Corinne Griffith.
That's
So
interesting.
he may have done that. Wow. Didn't.
Make sure.
See? I learned a lot today, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Merle and Karen, for being with us today. I'm thrilled.
Together.
I really appreciate it. And George, I'm sure I have nothing to add, but if you have any questions for your National Registry thing, Susan can give you my contact information. I'll be happy to give you whatever I can.
Thank you, Karen.
I will. And Merle, you were saying something and you were cutting out. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank all of you for the wonderful work that you're doing that is the end of our lives are such important, the end of our journey here, to be able to be in a place like that instead of in some sterile hospital room, is a gift. And I know how Marianne felt about it. And that's how this all came about. But thank you for the beautiful work that you're all doing to make that possible.
I agree.
Can I come to Medford?
Of course, we would love to have you in person. February, I think, is that right, George, that we would be officially registered?
We'll have had the first hearing in February. We'll be officially registered sometime in June of next year.
Oh, well,
And
maybe
next year, Merle, it might be safer for us to travel, and I'll come with you.
Right.
All right.
That would be absolutely marvelous.
I think that was our original plan, was to come visit before
Karen,
the world fell apart.
Karen, when I come, I'm bringing you with me.
And I'm coming,
Thank you.
and I'm coming. As long as it's safe to get on a plane.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
We don't want to have to get there in quarantine for 2 weeks.
No. Although you'd have a great place to be quarantined.
Right.
Yeah.
We all feel kind of fortunate have to be stuck here in Southern Oregon. It's pretty. Karen, wait, for the archive, what should I supply? I know I should get beautiful copies made of these and the plans. What else?
Well, you don't have any news articles, right?
Well, I do. I do.
Anything that you think is part of the story. You can even just take a photograph of that poster that you made that had a little history on it, and you know, I can just print it out for them or something. It would be lovely for it to be part of his legacy, because we have so little on it in the things that I've given them. So, in fact, it's been a couple of months since we made the deal, but it'll be 2 more weeks before they pick up the archives. So we can make sure that it's included as though it had been there all the time.
Okay. Well, that gives me a deadline. That's great. And just so you, just sort of a couple coincidences. The first, our board president, Christine Eberhardt, was with the Getty Foundation for many years. This is their.
You know the name. You know the name.
Oh, you do? Yeah. And she's wonderful. And my husband's family's all USC. They PhDs from USC, and Doheny Library head librarian. So is my
Merle's down here with the UCLA crowd, and if let's just say, good thing my grandfather went to USC, because I'm not sure that's where I would have gone. But I went to school in the Bay Area.
Is Tim Whalen still at the Getty?
Is who?
Timothy Whalen.
I don't know.
He was the head of their conservation department, and he and I
I
used
don't
to
think
sit
so.
on a
I don't
board
think so.
together.
There's a woman who's head of it now.
Okay. He always
There are a
used
lot
to
of new
hurt me
people
because I
together.
taught him how to buy things on eBay.
There are a lot of new people
Stop.
together. Yep. So it's, but the Getty is such a treasure in terms of my feeling confident that his work will live on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the right place.
Yay.
Okay.
That's
You ever-
great. Well, we'll mail you a package to go with the archive in the next week, so that
I will.
it looks like it was belonged all along.
Yeah, Susan, if you could send me everybody's contact information, and then I will send you a mailing address.
Excellent.
Okay.
I will do that.
That'll be
Okay.
great.
Great.
Bye. And thank you.
Everybody, have a terrific day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Pleasure to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
Dana, thank you for all you did.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Marianne.
Goodbye, Mary.
Bye-bye, Merle.
Thanks, Dana.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hey, Marianne.
Yeah, I'm still here.
I'm going to pause it here.